Good afternoon, and welcome to From Where We Are, stories of news and culture through the lens of USC in Southern California. I'm Jack Waterman, coming to you live from Studio B in USC's Annenberg Media Center.
And I'm Nicholas Din. It's November 7th, 2022. On today's show, this year's midterms have hit a record campaign spending.
So money does not always mean you win. You've got to have a message. You've got to have a candidate with some appeal.
What races are USC students following and why?
And a glimpse into what it's like to intern for the Caruso campaign.
All that and more from Where We Are.
The 2022 United Nations Climate Change Conference is on its way in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. COP27 opened today with the World's Leaders Summit, where 90 heads of states and representatives from 190 countries were in attendance. For the first week, it seeks to tackle the topics of climate finance, decarbonization, climate change adaptation, and agriculture. The conference will run until November 18th. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, on the importance of this year's conference.
And the clock is ticking. We are in the fight of our lives, and we are losing.
Jimmy Kimmel is set to host the 95th Academy Awards ceremony this coming March. This will be the late-night star's third time hosting the Oscars. He led the ceremony back in 2017 and 2018. He joins only a handful of stars, such as Whoopi Goldberg, Bob Hope, and Johnny Carson, to have hosted the show more than twice. Box office hits Top Gun Maverick, Elvis, and Everything Everywhere All at Once are expected to be among the nominees for Best Picture.
Nancy Pelosi spoke in a sit-down interview with CNN. For the first time since the attack on her husband, Pelosi shared details of finding out about the attack. She said she was awakened by Capitol Police in a D.C. hotel room at 5 o'clock in the morning.
They came in at that time. We didn't even know where he was or what his condition was. We just knew there was an assault on him in our home.
Speaker of the House Pelosi said the attack will help shape her decision on whether or not to run again if the Republicans take back the House majority.
LA is getting ready to elect its first new mayor in nearly a decade. The current mayor, Eric Garcetti, cannot run for re-election because of the two-term limit. Billionaire developer Rick Caruso is facing Congresswoman Karen Bass. Bass was the early favorite by far. She was backed by most of the Democratic Party establishment, but Rick Caruso has spent nearly $100 million on his campaign, and he has brought tomorrow's contest to nearly a dead heat. Money talks, and so does Sophia Hammerly.
Billionaire real estate developer Rick Caruso has now spent more than $92.3 million on his mayoral campaign, 99% of which comes from himself in the form of loans, according to the LA Times. His spending is nearly 8 times that of his opponent, Karen Bass, who has run her campaign almost exclusively on donations. This increase in spending is part of a national historical trend. The 2022 midterms are projected to be the most expensive midterms ever, with a total of $16.7 billion in expected spending, according to Open Secrets, an independent nonprofit research group that tracks money in U.S. politics. Jeffrey Cohen, USC Annenberg professor and director of the Center on Communication Leadership and Policy, described how while money makes a difference in politics, it doesn't necessarily secure a win.
I think part of what happens is people who are hugely rich sometimes think that the only way to win is to spend a lot of money, and they have the money to spend. I personally think there are a lot of problems with too much money in politics. I really do think there is, but it's where we are.
Across the country, several other races are seeing record levels of spending. The Wisconsin governor's race is the most expensive in state history, nearing $115 million in spending, according to the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign. In the race for U.S. Senate in Georgia, candidates have raised a combined $150 million. The Los Angeles race is not the first mayoral race to see such high spending. Former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg poured $102 million into his campaign for a third term in 2009. There appears to be a strong association between campaign spending and political success. In 2020, 88% of those elected to the House of Representatives spent more money than their opponents, according to Open Secrets. This isn't evidence of causation, however. Richard Lau, a professor of political science at Rutgers, said it is less about money causing winning and more about winning attracting money. Cohen agreed that it wasn't a direct correlation.
So money does not always mean you win. You've got to have a message. You've got to have a candidate with some appeal.
More than half of Caruso's spending has gone toward radio, TV, and digital advertising. This is part of a national trend of proliferation in political ads since 2010, when the Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission Supreme Court case overturned restrictions on campaign spending.
If we hadn't had Citizens United, I don't think Caruso could spend the amount of money that he's spending. It doesn't mean he wouldn't still win. It'd be a different system. But he wouldn't be able to do it by spending all that money.
Is Caruso's spending enough to sway the election in his favor? Voters will have their final say tomorrow on Election Day. For Annenberg Media, I'm Sophia Hammerly.
Billionaire Rick Caruso and Congresswoman Karen Bass are facing off in the most expensive Los Angeles mayoral race in history. Meredith McCabe had the chance to talk to Caruso campaign intern Jennifer Alvarado. She's been working on the campaign as a policy advisor since before the primary elections last June.
Jennifer Alvarado's early mentors were police officers, LAPD. That may not be so unusual, but she grew up in South LA, a community not typically known for its positive relationship with law enforcement. Today, she's studying public health at USC. She believes in giving back to the community, and these days, Alvarado's an intern on the Rick Caruso campaign.
I learned that Rick Caruso was running for mayor from one of my LAPD mentors. I saw the opportunity to support Rick and in some ways give back.
Many Angelenos see Caruso as a billionaire developer, Republican turned Democrat, and he is all that. But Alvarado, who has known him for nearly 10 years, points out that he's also a huge philanthropist. In fact, Alvarado says many of her educational opportunities came from a nonprofit Caruso donates to called Operation Progress. It helps underserved youth in South LA to reach their full potential. Her personal connection led Alvarado to seek out the campaign opportunity, but she has since grown to admire his strategy.
Rick's approaches are unconventional in the sense that, he is funding his own campaign, but guess what? He's worked so hard for every dollar. And as a successful developer, I am confident that he's going to be able to navigate through the housing policies and cut through all of that red tape.
While Alvarado admires Caruso's unconventional approach, his opponents argue that his development background is not suited for public office. Representative Karen Bass, on the other hand, has had 3 public service careers in healthcare, community organizing, and as a lawmaker in Sacramento and D.C. for over a decade. Nonetheless, Alvarado finds Caruso's career path somewhat admirable.
I feel like Rick can be relatable if you allow him to be. He was the first in his family to graduate from college, and so am I. And I feel like, there's a lot of similar struggles, I feel like, that we've had in our journeys.
The mayoral race is down to the single digits, with Bass still narrowly in the lead. Bass supporters shared their reasons for voting for the Congresswoman in an LA Times article, citing civil rights and multiracial unity, the fight against a, quote, pseudo-Trumpian developer, and Bass's identity as a woman in light of reproductive rights. As for Alvarado, she'll be out canvassing tomorrow for Team Caruso.
We're probably going to spend the day in the field under the rain. We're still going to go door to door and get people out to vote.
This, of course, marks just one intern's experience, but it gives us a glimpse into one of the most significant and newsworthy campaigns in LA mayoral history. No matter whether you're Team Caruso or Team Bass, be sure to grab your umbrellas and brave the polls tomorrow between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. For Annenberg Media, I'm Meredith McCabe.
We also reached out to Karen Bass interns for comment, but they did not get back to us, unfortunately. Bass is also noted for engagement with the community. In 1990, she founded a community-based social justice organization called Community Coalition. The organization targets substance abuse, poverty, and crime in South LA. I'm Jack Waterman. We're glad you're with us for From Where We Are.
And I'm Nicholas Den. It's 10 minutes past the hour. Coming up, USC students weigh in on this year's midterms and what races they are following. And a conversation with Annenberg Media Director Christina Bellantoni about covering elections. Election day is just a few hours away. Students and adults will be heading to polling centers, standing in lines, checking in, going to booths to fill out ballots either manually or electronically, and doing their civic duty. Eric Ye has the story.
Walking around USC today, we find two things that are unusual. The first is that it's raining. And the second is that after many months of buildup, tomorrow is election day. About 1 out of 10 registered voters in California is under the age of 25. But young voters are an important demographic, and tomorrow's results will affect their lives for years to come. By the elevator on the second floor of the Annenberg building, music industry junior Emily Sabinas studies with her friend. For Sabinas, the election of a new mayor for LA, Congresswoman Karen Bass or developer Rick Caruso, is top of mind.
Because the mayor holds an important position in our city. I'm also from LA, so when I first been noticing the politics and stuff, I've always known that Eric Garcetti has been our mayor. So now I'm seeing that he is not going to be our mayor anymore. We're going to have a new one. I think it's important to okay, what's the transition going to be now with our new mayor?
The LA mayoral race has garnered lots of attention among LA natives, with all the ads being shown. But not everyone is following certain candidates. Neuroscience freshman Lourdes Salanya explains what has her interest for the election.
I'm also not following other races when it comes to the people, but propositions, yes.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, my major focus was on Proposition 1.
Proposition 1 would guarantee abortion rights in California's state constitution. Here's Salanya again on why this prop matters to her.
It's captured my interest because I don't know, personally, I think it's very extreme because, there is pro-choice and pro-life, and it's just such a big topic now without Roe v. Wade.
This year's midterms election has many candidates who have no prior political experience. Some of them nationwide include former football player Herschel Walker, TV presenter Dr. Oz, and more. Neuroscience sophomore Cass Martinez goes more in depth.
It's more so just hearing sort of how crazy some of the candidates can be. That's more so how I've been following the elections, and just seeing, how extreme some of the candidates are.
Public relations junior Ella Bimman tells us why voting is important.
I think it's the most important thing we as citizens and people in this country need to do. So regardless of if I feel super passionate about something that's on the ballot, I think it's important to use my voice and make a vote one way or the other, because if I'm not voting, then I'm not helping anyone, I'm just being silent. So, and I also think if you vote, then you have less reason, I guess, to complain if it doesn't go your way. And for the people that don't vote and then get upset about the results, it's well, you didn't do anything.
So you can do something. Go out and vote tomorrow. For Annenberg Media, I'm Eric Ye.
With midterm elections dominating all newsrooms, including our own, I sat down with Christina Bellantoni, a journalist with over 20 years of experience covering politics and elections, working from the local level all the way to presidential elections with Capitol Hill, PBS NewsHour, and many more, as well as her role as the director of our USC Annenberg Media Center. I began by asking Bellantoni about what sparked her interest to cover politics.
I got into reporting because I loved politics. I loved elections. I was really interested in it. And I wasn't quite even sure that I wanted to be a journalist. And then the 2000 presidential election, the first one I could vote in, was what inspired me. And so I've been a reporter. I've been out at election night forums. One of my most fun and cherished memories was being in Grant Park the night that Barack Obama was elected. I had been covering his campaign that whole year, and just being there with the crowd was like really amazing and interesting. And I've also run a lot of election coverage. So probably the most memorable on that front was when I was at the LA Times in 2016, and the win of Donald Trump really surprised everyone. No one, including myself, had predicted that it would happen. I was also 8 months pregnant, and I had a documentary crew following me around because there were this documentary about all these different places on that election day, and they chose me, of course, because they were hoping I would go into labor on camera, which did not happen, but extremely memorable and intense. But and then obviously working with our student newsroom, some of those. But for me, the midterm elections are one of the most important things that happen. The direction that Congress goes in and who controls Congress is really important, and in some cases, I would argue more important than who the president is. And local elections are really important. You know, the direction of what Los Angeles is going to be like, or where I live in Burbank, what Burbank schools are going to be like. It's really critical for people to get involved. And so I just fundamentally believe in people participating. And one thing that inspires people to participate is great political coverage long before Election Day and then on the day of.
And for those who are voting in the upcoming election and will be watching all the what unfolds in the midterm, they get to see it on the screen and the finished product. You, more than probably anyone around, knows what goes into creating that finished product. So talk us through a little bit of what the lead up and the final night looks like.
So behind the scenes, what's happening, all of the reporting on who the candidates are, what they've done, really that should be done weeks in advance. If you have like a negative story about someone, you know, or there's a scandal or you've uncovered something, it's not fair to voters or to any of the candidates to drop it the day of the election. It just doesn't give people enough time to process or respond. So all of that like investigative work should have been done, honestly, in like September, maybe the beginning of October, the latest. But every once in a while, you can't really control that. So there might be big pieces. If anything, they would have come out, you know, a couple days before. What you need to have in place are things like, what is your data going to look like? What are people coming to your news outlet for? For example, here at Annenberg Media, people are not going to go to the website or listen to Annenberg Radio News of who controls the U.S. Senate. But they might want to know, what is this going to mean for students, or what does this mean for young people, or what does it mean specifically for USC? So really understanding your audience is important. I always tell people it is a marathon. You know, don't wake up first thing in the morning. Sleep in. Make sure you have an early Wednesday morning crew, because that actually can get even busier the next day. Make sure you're drinking water, eating fruit in addition to all the like crappy newsroom pizza you will eat. So we'll follow that here in the student newsroom, but it's a lot of waiting. And what is fun for me is going to the polls. I've always liked that. I actually use it as an assignment in my classes when I'm teaching on election day. Like, let's just go to a polling place and just talk to people. And the question I like to ask is really open-ended. What inspired you to come today, right? Because someone can answer anything. Well, I wanted to show my kid what democracy looks like, or I really want to vote against so-and-so, or I really care about abortion rights, or something like that. So it just allows you to get into people and have follow-up questions. And then you want to get a sense of, what is it like? Are people waiting in long lines? Is no one around? Is it pouring rain? Is it snow that people aren't able to get to the polls? Is there violence? All of these questions that you sort of gather. And then as polls close, you kind of have an expectation.
If you could give, you know, a student who'll be working on any election, but specifically here in the Annenberg newsroom, a little piece of advice in the crazy that will be tomorrow and the days after that, what would you say to them?
Two things. One is probably harder than the other as someone who is not a professional journalist yet. So that first one is try to look at things. I don't like the term objectivity. Try to look at things from a distance, right? Almost like pretend your body's out, you know, your soul is out of your body and you're looking at everybody else. Like, what do you observe from a totally uninvested party? I'm not saying don't have an opinion. That's nonsense. That's not what we teach here. But being able to recognize that there are people that feel passionately about a lot of different things at a lot of different times, and thinking about how you incorporate your journalism and your questions and even who you choose to talk to for that way. Like, don't just seek out people who are going to feel the same way you do about it. And then the other part is to really use all of your senses. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? You know, you're out at a watch party for somebody. You're talking to students who are at a watch party here in Annenberg. Like, how does that, what's the vibe? And gather that with everything that's not just getting quotes. Like, really try to soak it all in and relay back what you're seeing and experiencing.
That's all we have time for on today's From Where We Are. I'm Jack Waterman.
And I'm Nick Liston.
Make sure to tune into our ARN election special tomorrow at 7:30. See ya!